r/AskReddit by Mr.GreatStory. Teachers of Reddit, what was the best excuse for being late that turned out to be true? She had to take her sister to school and drive her mom to rehab. She was always late to class because her mom just wanted to sleep in. The problem was, if the mom was late or did not go, she would have violated her probation and gone to prison. I never marked her late. If she missed anything important, she could come in at lunch or after school to make it up. Not a student, but one of my teaching assistants when I ran a preschool in West Philly. Sorry I missed yesterday. My friend shot my mom. Naturally, I'm a little speechless. Oh no, it's okay. He was aiming for someone else. Student here. I headed into school early to get some studying done in the library before my night class. I was one exit away when I was caught in a 3-car accident. Most of the expressway afterward was gridlock with only one lane left open. I did eventually make it into my lab class 15 minutes late, with a few scrapes and bruises. My professor's reaction was simply, "Oh, that was you." I was the kid. Physics, 11th grade. The day prior to this day, my neighbor passed away, and her son was a friend of mine, and also in this class. Terribly long story, but it was a suicide by hanging, and I was the one who found her. I had nightmares all night and skipped the first half of school the next day. When my physics teacher saw me later, she asked where I was that morning. Before I could explain, she said, "That friend was looking for you and concerned. He seemed more worried than he should have been and was a little upset about you not being there. The guy's mom died, but he still went to class and didn't tell anyone, but was worried about me. I couldn't tell her what had happened at that point, so I just said I overslept." I had a student whose father had died and had not done any homework or prep for the geography class. From what I heard, the teacher scolded him for not doing so, but the student didn't want to say anything, presumably sensitive issue, so his best friend shouted at the teacher, "Don't you have any shame? His father died last night," and the teacher said, "I don't care." There was an audible gasp, and I was in the next room. Needless to say, that teacher is no longer employed here. I was one of about 20 kids who were late to school. We showed up at the school office as a group, and when questioned why we were late, we said, "The school bus blew up." They questioned, "So the engine blew up?" The kids know, the whole bus, in flames. It blew up. There was many conferences between the teachers, all of them thinking we embellished the story. Next thing you know, one of the admin staff has the news website open. A very obvious image of an entire bus on fire with a bunch of kids in our school uniform standing in front of it. Our late slip for a class red school bus blew up. Told me he got pulled over by the cops for wobbly driving on his bike, and they thought he was drunk. Turned out he was just dodging all the slugs on the street. A guy in my college class missed class one day. The next day he came in with his eye covered up and medical paperwork in hand. Apparently he got pecked in the eye by a chicken. Former student here. "Sorry, boss, my stepdad tried to kill us last night, and I had to deal with the cops." Professor just looked at me for a moment and said, "Dude, do you want to go grab a drink and talk about this after class?" Man, my English prof was a bro when I was in college. School sporting event. Kid on our team was late because someone stole his windshield wipers and it was snowing out. Kept having to pull over to the side of the road and wipe off his windshield. After 9/11, my small town high school received bomb threats every week for 2 months, and they decided to make us attend school on a Saturday. I and about 5 others showed up for our classes, and every teacher said something, like "I can't wait for the excuses on Monday." Most of the excuses were something along the lines of family plans or whatnot, but one kid was made read his dad's note aloud to the class because our first period teacher thought it was hilarious. In the most down south accent you can imagine, it went something like, "My son ain't too smart, but he knows you ain't supposed to get punished for someone else being a dumbass. Bought him a 6-pack, so he was drunk. Y'all can fuck off." I wish we had smartphones to record back then, so I could share it. I'm not the teacher, but we are told that he had a paramedic student who on their way to write their final exam rolled their car into a creek, picked up whatever books they had out of their car, and ran the rest of the way to class. Obviously got there late and in tears. You better believe they had a different exam date. When I was student teaching, I was late because there were a bunch chickens in the middle of the road. They wouldn't move at all. This is in the middle of a city of 200,000 people. Freaking chickens. I finally get to school and profusely apologize to my mentor teacher, and I told her why I was late thinking it sounded ridiculous. She said, "Yeah, those chickens are fucking assholes. They surrounded my car in the McDonald's parking lot last year. Don't worry about." They were protesting the McChicken sandwich. I had a 6-year-old turn up late to her lesson and blurt out, "Sorry I was late. I had to color in a bunny." Seems fair. In high school, I biked to class. One day I hit a rock and ate absolute shit. I obviously got to class late. Before I could say a word, my teacher stopped the class and said, "Thank you for finally joining us. Why are you so late?" I raised my heavily bloodied hands and elbows. It must have looked bad because she audibly gasped and rushed me to the school nurse, apologizing non-stop the entire way. Edit, my B. I'm not a teacher. I slipped while cutting my apple up before a soil science lab. It was a medium cut, but there was no Mac lab available for this experiment because it was the first of 3 weeks experiments. I wrapped it up in toilet paper and figured I'd use the first aid kit in the lab to strip it shut, worst case scenario, and disinfect it. It didn't hurt much, but it just wouldn't chill out. It was also winter, so I put gloves on and went to catch the bus, 10-minute ride to the uni. By the time I got to the lab, there was blood everywhere. It was a small, but very deep cut. I showed up to lab on time, but my professor took at the blood dripping down my arm and said, "I admire you bringing yourself here, but Christ, go to the clinic." My prof started my experiment for me, literally just making mud milkshakes for an hour, and every subsequent lab would ask if I was missing any limbs that morning. A kid's apartment burned down overnight. He was a little late but still came. In my hometown, if you walked into anywhere late and said the phrase "sorry, grain train," you were never challenged. It was extremely common for 50+ carriage trains to run through the middle of town. MTV paid me $50 to fill my backpack with cement and carry it around for the day. I accepted that excuse. The student later regretted it, as a replacement backpack and college textbooks far exceeded $50. But he got his moment of fame and I didn't penalize him for his tardy. Gotta live a little. Edit, someone found a newspaper article on this. Turns out it was $200. He earned $100 for the first day and $100 when he returned the next day. I remembered $50, but it was 19 years ago. So I was right to believe him. He still lost all his stuff, thanks cement, and I remember him telling me it wasn't worth it. And edit, typo. Bear on the backyard. No access gate. Animal control had to trank it from the room and drag it through the house. Made the news. Got to retake the test I missed after sending her the news article. I'm Pink. A fair-skinned student, age 10, went with a friend to the Holi festival at a nearby Hindu temple where she was covered with red powder and dyed bright red from head to toe. Her mother, another teacher at the school, had made her sit for hours in the bathtub to soak it off, but even after another round of early morning shower scrubbing, she arrived at school a pleasant shade of pink. Technically, she wasn't late, but she stayed in her mother's classroom until the bell rang. I was the student. My neighbor had a really social goat, and she figured out how to escape her pen in order to come over and hang out. She escaped and followed me to the bus stop, and when the bus came, she tried to follow me onto it. I couldn't actually get on the bus without her being right behind me, so I had to get off, bring her home, and call my dad to bring me to school. Continue to watch. The best is still to come. Taught a group of seniors the first period. It was towards the end of the year. I had a class of around 30 and only 5 were there when the bell rang. Halfway through class the rest of them show up. They went out to Cracker Barrel for breakfast and brought me some back. All was forgiven. I had a chemistry professor show up about 15 minutes late. Just when people were about to leave, he shows up and explains that he was just in a car accident. His car had been in a rollover and he still showed up. He said he was okay. He drove a Volvo. I had a sociology prof in college who was never late for anything. One day, we showed up for class and he wasn't there. After 5 minutes or so, we are reading the handbook to find out what level of professor he was, and found that he was an associate professor and entitled to 10 minutes wait. A few seconds before his time expired, a voice came from under his desk saying, "Today we are going to discuss withdrawn personalities." He conducted the whole class from under his desk. My best friend and I used to roller skate to school, and one day we both forgot to put our shoes in our backpacks. So we skated to the vice principal's office and got to skip first period to go home for shoes. We stopped at Taco Bell on the way back for breakfast because we figured we were already excused. I had a teacher in high school that would tell us if we are gonna be late to pick up coffee because 2 minutes late is the same as 15. UK, a student couldn't submit an assignment on time as the Wi-Fi was down on the megabus. Edit. Cheers for all the love, and I'll be sure to tell the student his megabus mishap is relatable across the globe. We had an exam in my class and the teacher got a message from a student saying that he was going to be late because his car had a flat tire. The student was known to party. The teacher didn't think it could be true, so as a joke the teacher asked him to bring the tire back. He brought the flat tire back in the middle of the exam. Needless to say, the professor didn't expect that. That student had been partying. Drives to school, takes off tire, punctures it, and bobs your Auntie Mary. Don't even need to puncture it. Just deflate it a bunch, and then after the exam just fill it back up. Not me, but one of my good friends. She went to the Royal Military College of Canada, where they wear their uniforms and there are often tourists visiting the campus. Apparently, it was completely normal to be waylaid by tourists looking to have their photos taken with students in uniform that all they had to say when they walked in late was tourists and the professors would let it slide. She always wondered how many family photos she was actually in over her time spent there. Me. My bus hit a bird and the whole windshield was cracked. We had to wait for another bus to pick us up. Story time. I was the only high schooler on our school bus one winter. The other detail important to this story is that we had the oldest model bus that wasn't in the best mechanical shape. It had one of those mechanically operated doors. It would shoot out a plume of black smoke every time it started and just looked much less fancy than all the other buses the school had. Anyway, one winter it was so cold that the diesel engine stopped working. The bus driver said the cold made the diesel in the fuel lines gel up. I have no idea if that's accurate, but either way, the bus wouldn't start. Fortunately, we were only 5 miles from the school and all the kids had been picked up already. So they just radioed another, newer bus to loop back around and pick us up. The bus driver had radioed the elementary school, but completely forgot to let the high school know. So I show up to class and the teacher asks why I was late. I said, the cold caused the fuel lines to gel up in the school bus, repeating exactly what the bus driver told us. But I was the only high schooler on that bus, so no other students were there to back up my story. The teacher didn't believe me, and instead of just calling the main office to verify my story, she mocked me in front of the whole class, saying it's not possible for fuel to freeze in the cold. And everyone in the class agreed with her, saying that I was a bad liar and laughed at how dumb my story was. Ultimately, the office did let her know about the bus after she tried giving me detention, but the embarrassment is still there, and she never gave me an apology. Open bracket. Not a teacher, but a friend said his house blew away. Apparently, tornado. This was me as a student. My parents thought I get President's Day off, so they didn't wake me up. Not a teacher, but I was training a new hire at a job and the guy came in 45 minutes late, stating he got halfway to work and realized he didn't have shoes on. It was winter and like 15 degrees outside. Literally today, the child missed my first hour class. Note said car accident on the way to school and would be coming late. Kid comes for second hour, has pictures on his phone of the rollover accident. WTF. Kid, go home. Rest. Take care of yourself. Edit. I have another one, although this one happened to a classmate when we were in college training to be teachers. She missed a really important class, came for just the last 10 minutes or so, because her neighbor knocked on her door while in active labor asking for help a little, while before she was supposed to leave for class. A classmate walked back to the neighbor's house with a prego neighbor and delivered her baby in the living room while on the phone to 911. Paramedics came and mom and baby were fine, but the classmate needed to go home and shower/change first because she was covered in blood. A flock of wild turkeys in the road. Not always school, but this happened more than once in my life. For those of you who have never found yourselves in this situation, there is no way out of it. Wild turkeys will move when they damn well decide to do so, and only then. A kid missed my first period class one morning, but was in school later that day. When I asked him why he hadn't arrived in time for my course, he said his cow was birthing its calf that morning, so he'd picked being in the barn over English. It made sense to me. His essays weren't going to win any ribbons at the county fair, but his calf could. I was late to APBO because my goats had kids that morning. I feel like that should have counted for my grade. Edit. Thanks for the kind words and generous awards. My bio teacher was actually a neighbor and had been by my farm before, so I, of course, didn't get in any trouble. It's not a farming community, though, very suburban, so I was the only one in the school that could have used the excuse. I had a teacher who showed up about halfway through the class. Apparently her car had slid, intense snowstorm the night before, and she had walked the last mile or so. I was a student. When I was in college I opened my front door to see SWAT teams and the agents outside of my house. The one who looked at me was holding some kind of I went back inside. From what I heard, there was a multiple sting operation that happened around my town and my neighbor's place got raided. I missed half of my classes that day. When I was in college, my psych professor told us that the only excuse for being late was a funeral procession. For any other reason, you wouldn't be allowed to come in. A few weeks into the semester, I was headed from one building to another, which involved crossing the main road. Lo and behold, there was one very long funeral procession going by. I got a short video of it as proof, then stood on the sidewalk to let it go by. Unfortunately, the procession made me 5 minutes late to class. I knocked on the door, and the professor came over to start to tell me off. I showed her the video. Well, I'll be damned. Come on in. My car got hit by lightning. It did, in the school parking lot. Her tires were melted to the pavement. She had to go out and deal with the tow truck / call her parents / etc. It was pretty dramatic. Obligatory not a teacher, but I'm an admin at a music school. I had a mom frantically call me and let me know her daughter would probably be late or miss their guitar lesson in a couple of hours cause she couldn't find the kid. I was just kind of like, okay, well I will let her teacher know. I got another call about an hour later from the same mom. She found her kid, but apparently the daughter went to a friend's house and decided to dye her hair green. They lived pretty close by, so I did let them know they could still come in for their lesson. Mom said she would call me back and let me know in a minute or two. Never called back. Her daughter showed up for her lesson about 5 minutes late with this bright green coiffure. I gotta admit it looked rad as fuck, but also kind of a confusing thing to be an audience to the build up. One of my organ students told me he was late arriving for his lesson because he got stuck behind a lengthy funeral procession en route to the cemetery. I knew he was telling the truth because I had played the organ for the service earlier that morning and the church was packed. I was a student. I was walking to school and 2 of our cats were following me. I had to round them up and take them home. My dad wrote me a note for my lateness, which included the phrase animal show and tell day. Edit. AWW. Thanks for all the awards. Here are pictures of the cats. The 2 that followed me were the orange one sitting on the dishwasher door and the tabby underneath it. Better picture of her included. Fun fact, all but one cat, the tabby in the middle, had the same mother. I apologize that I'm writing this on mobile, so there might be errors. I'm an English professor, and one year a pretty good student showed up without one of his 2 major term papers. He explained that his safe had been stolen by a contractor who was working on their house. His laptop was in the safe, and that's where his paper was. I genuinely believe him, because he'd been a really good student. Then over the next few weeks, he started to show up to class looking very tired. He said that he was on a hunt for the person who stole his safe, and he was spending late nights with his cousin driving around looking for the guy, because they knew his van. Now, the student and his cousin were both recently back from tours in Iraq, and had seen combat experience. They wanted to find the guy, to beat the shit out of him, and get the safe back, because his wife's wedding ring was in the safe as well as a bunch of cash. He rewrote the paper and turned it in, apologetic that it wasn't up to his usual quality, but he still kept coming to class looking like he hadn't slept. After a little while, he came very happily to my office hours, and he reported that he found the guy after a long search that involved breaking into a meth den, shaking people down with baseball bats, and even bribing some prostitutes. He said that they found the guy's van at a Taco Bell after getting a tip from a prostitute, and they cornered him and waited for the police to come. I read in the news that he had in fact done a citizen's arrest and stopped the guy at a Taco Bell, and that they ended up calling in the Secret Service because he used the cash that he stole from the safe to buy a bunch of counterfeiting equipment. Secret Service apparently investigates counterfeiting, so the whole investigation happened because this guy, who I dubbed the White Shaft, tracked the scumbag down through the bad side of town late at night to get a wedding ring, some cash, and his research paper back. It all turned out to be true. He got the ring and the laptop back. I gladly accepted his original paper, and it got a much higher grade than the rewrite. Edit. Thank you, kind strangers, for the rewards and upvotes. I'm pretty blown away by the response. I'm trying to read all the comments, but it's making me a bad teacher. I don't want to have my head stuck on my phone during class and miss the student who might generate the sequel. Edit 2. A couple of people asked for more details, so here are a few more. I can't recall the year this happened, but it was the height of the war with the US and Iraq. My student had enrolled in the army right after 9/11 on the same day as his cousin. They were both just out of high school and enrolled due to patriotism and frustration. According to him, when he started his vigilante spree, he actually went inside of a house used by meth addicts to try and find the guy. They shook the house down with baseball bats and forced everyone out into the street. When the cops showed up, they told my student how dangerous this was and not to do it again. Then, they gave him their cards and said, "But call us if you do." Thank you for watching. Tell me which one was your favorite. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. The next video will be even more interesting. You are a legend.